All right, moving on to chapter 3 on the way in which divine truth is to be made known. So now we're into the heart of the treatment of the discourse, and there's some wonderful lines in here and arguments that we shall read and discuss. So St. Thomas says that there's a twofold mode of truth, and we've talked about this a bit. Some truths about God exceed the ability of human reason. So these are the revealed truths, and not all of those revealed truths exceed reason. God has revealed himself as existing. That's not a truth that exceeds our reason. God hasn't revealed himself as a Trinity, and that does exceed our reason. Now, how do we know that there are truths that exceed our reason? We know a triangle, for instance. A triangle does not exceed our reason. But in the case of God, it does, because we cannot comprehend the divine substance through our natural power. St. Thomas gives us the reason for this here. And it's a very Aristotelian reason, as distinct from a Platonic or an Augustinian reason. This is on paragraph 3, for according to its manner of knowing in the present life, the intellect depends on the sense for the origin of knowledge. And so those things that do not fall under the senses cannot be grasped by the human intellect, except insofar as the knowledge of them is gathered from sensible things. I'm going to pause it every once in a while. I'm sorry about that. I just have family things going on. Anyway, back to chapter 3 here, paragraph 3 of chapter 3. So St. Thomas tells us in a very important passage why it is that we cannot grasp the nature of God. He says, quote, for according to its manner of knowing in the present life, the intellect depends on the sense to the origin of knowledge. And so those things that do not fall under the senses cannot be grasped by the human intellect, except insofar as the knowledge of them is gathered from sensible things. That's very interesting. You'd think that that would lead to an empiricist or materialist view even, at least an epistemologically empiricist view that, well, maybe there are things that are immaterial and transcend the senses, but we can never know them directly. We only know them through the senses. It sounds like Kant's view, actually, a more skeptical view of any possibility of knowing anything with scientific universality and necessity comes from David Hume, of course, who thought that the idea of a substance or essence is an illusion. We never see causes in reality. We only think one thing coming after another. And our psychology develops a certain sense of connection with these, a customary connection, but that doesn't say that there actually is one in the world. Now, let's see what distinguishes St. Thomas from the epistemological skeptic and empiricist is what he says here. He says, of course, yes, things that do not fall under the senses cannot be grasped. And we cannot grasp directly immaterial things. The essence of an angel, for instance. Pure substance. But then he says, except insofar as the knowledge of things that transcend the sense, knowledge of them is gathered from sensible things. That makes all the difference. And of course, one has to inquire about what that means. How is it that through our knowledge of sensible essence and material substance, can we know anything about what transcends that aspect of reality? How do we gather the knowledge of these things from sensible things? That's not an easy question to answer. It has something to do, as we saw in Lesson 7, with his commentary on Boethius, it has something to do with abstraction, of course. Okay. Now, from the effects of sensible things, we can say something about their causes, right? From the effects of life, looking at the fact that things move and reproduce, we can establish that the cause of such activity has to be a soul. And that's what distinguishes living from non-living things. The cause of their behavior can't be accounted for by mere material, mechanical, non-living causes, like it can with rocks and non-material, non-living objects. He says sensible things cannot lead the human intellect to the point of seeing in them the nature of the divine substance, because the sensible things are the effects that fall short of the cause. But then he says, beginning with sensible things, our intellect is led to the point of knowing about God, that he exists, and other such characteristics. By the way, characteristics that will take up 3 complete books to elaborate adequately about. So there are certain intelligible truths about God that are open to human reason and others that surpass. So we can't know completely about the cause of the effects, the effect meaning being itself, the world. We can't know the fullness, the essence of that cause, God. But we can know something about it. Why? Because of the famous Thomistic principle that something of the cause is in the effect. Okay. And then in chapter 4, paragraph 4, he speaks about the way in which the angels know God better than we do because their nature is higher than ours, and they know through their nature. And yet even their knowledge of God is inadequate. How much more ours? In paragraph 5, he says something very interesting. We even have defects in our knowledge of the material world. He says, we do not know a great many of the properties of sensible things. And in most cases, we're not able to discover fully the natures of those properties that we apprehend by the sense. St. Thomas is telling us that, our knowledge of the world is limited. It's inadequate. There are so many things we just do not know, even about that which is proper to our nature. That which is commensurate with our knowing power, namely material substance. And, after 700 odd years of natural sciences, overturning one theory over another, getting further and further into the interior of the atom and recognizing the quantum world and the like, I think St. Thomas's point here about our inadequacy and inability to fully comprehend even an atom, or a mosquito, I think St. Thomas says at one point in another word, is pretty much demonstrated. So, if human reason can't even know everything about material world adequately, how much less about God? Okay, next section will be on chapter 4.